So today's discussion really revolves around how the shifting alliances, especially Russia and China empowering Iran, are creating a real geopolitical tinderbox for Israel.
Yeah, exactly. It's that hair-raising scenario where global power shifts also strain the old rules-based order, right?
Right, right. And it's like when you see your trusted building blocks, the Western alliances begin to crumble as new unexpected alliances form, like Russia and China supporting Tehran, which puts Israel in a very difficult position.
And it's not only about support on the military front. There's a whole layer of strategic and diplomatic realignments too, isn't there?
Absolutely. It's like the West, particularly, say the US, is grappling with this. On one hand, you've got the West boosting Ukraine, but on the other, there's this unspoken leniency towards Iran, which is, it's like a double standard that puts Israel right in the middle of a brewing storm.
Yeah. So then, if we peel the layers back, one major theme is the erosion of the rules-based international order. Would you agree?
Definitely. It's pretty evident how the traditional established norms are being challenged. You see it when you consider the idea that countries are now diversifying alliances, moving away from solely Western ties. And that really isolates Israel because their security calculations are thrown into
Right.
disarray.
But here's something that bugs me a little. While discussing support for Iran, one point mentioned was that Iran's pursuit of nuclear capabilities is driven by security concerns. Yet, isn't there a risk that focusing too much on this narrative might oversimplify Iran's strategic ambitions?
That's an interesting point. Sure, it's clear that Iran's nuclear ambitions are couched in a need to deter adversaries. However, I'd argue that, it's not just about security. It's also a way to project power and translate regional aspirations into concrete military potential. The idea is that Russia and China, by supporting Iran, are essentially giving it a geopolitical turbo boost.
Yep, that turbo boost you mentioned really underscores how quickly regional dynamics can shift. Can we talk a bit more about the implications for US military engagement here?
Oh, for sure. The transcript hints that the US might face logistical nightmares if it were to engage with Iran directly. It's like, imagine gearing up for a full scale sports event, but realizing half your equipment is missing or outdated. There's just a huge imbalance there that questions the feasibility of a direct military confrontation.
Indeed. And then there's Israel's position in all this, right? How do you think Israel's limited capacity to withstand prolonged conflict plays into this equation?
Exactly. Israel finds itself in a precarious situation. Israel's military strength is legendary in the region, but when you consider the threats coming from multiple fronts and with stronger backing for Iran from massive players like Russia and China, it becomes like a David versus a Goliath scenario where David suddenly faces, well, not just one Goliath, but a couple of super Goliaths.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, despite these challenges, the conversation includes a discussion about potential ceasefire negotiations. How realistic is that given the current state of military readiness?
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Ceasefire talks seem to hinge on Iran's actual military capability at any given moment. It's like waiting for the punch to land, or not landing, so that both sides can maybe reconsider their options. The key word here is uncertainty. While some might cling to hope that a ceasefire could stabilize the situation, the inherent unpredictability in Iran's military buildup makes any predictions tough.
I get that, but isn't there a risk that by assuming a ceasefire could be negotiated, we might delay more robust responses or even escalate tensions further?
That's a valid challenge. It's critical to be cautious about assuming that diplomatic engagement will prevail, especially when the underlying strategic struggles and security dilemmas are so deep rooted. It might be more of a temporary bandage than a genuine solution.
Right, exactly. And exploring these alliances, Russia and China's increasing involvement in Iran, it really makes one wonder how this will influence global power structures in the coming decade, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. When global superpowers realign their interests, it's like an earthquake shaking the very foundations of international order. With long-standing alliances being questioned and new networks forming, it opens up a lot of possibilities for completely redefining global influence.
Yep, I see that. And more so, it's interesting to consider how this situation contrasts with the West's supportive stance toward Ukraine. There's a sort of selective application of international norms, no?
Yeah, that's a sharp comparison, and it really does highlight something critical. While there's robust support for Ukraine, Iran seems to be treated almost as a second class concern, which then empowers Iran to pursue actions without the same level of oversight. It's like having a rule book that only applies to half of the players on the field.
Exactly. And I suppose that selective enforcement only further undermines the rules based order that so many on the world stage have worked to maintain. Would you say that's one of the reasons for the current tension?
Certainly. By not applying the same standards uniformly, the trust in international institutions erodes. Countries start hedging their bets, exploring alternatives to Western dominance, and that really accelerates shifts in how global affairs unfold.
Right, definitely. So, wrapping it up, this whole scenario paints a picture of a very fluid and uncertain geopolitical landscape where traditional alliances are faltering. And what we've seen is that even in the face of such challenges, the responses, both military and diplomatic, are far from straightforward.
Exactly. Yes. It's all about navigating choppy waters where each new move potentially redefines power balances globally. And that's what makes this situation so compelling to analyze. The stakes are high, the risks are vast, and every decision from any player could tip the scales dramatically.
Yeah, no doubt. I just wonder, though, with these shifting alliances, how much of an impact will domestic politics in these supporting countries have on their foreign policy decisions? It seems like internal debates could add another layer of complexity.
That's a great point. Internal politics in both Russia and China, as well as in Iran, are bound to influence their external maneuvers. Political pressures, economic challenges, and public perception all feed into these decisions. It's like a multi-layered chess game, and sometimes the moves on the domestic front ripple out to affect the international board in unpredictable ways.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, the video we're discussing even highlights the possibility that despite these complex engagements, the US might struggle logistically if it were ever to go to war with Iran. That, in itself, is a major recalibration of military aspirations.
Exactly. It really calls into question the viability of traditional military interventions when superpowers have their own sets of alliances and proxies at play. It forces policymakers to think outside the conventional playbook and perhaps lean more on diplomatic channels, though, as we discussed, those are risky too.
Yep, exactly. Risky indeed. So ultimately, this discussion and the video's content challenges us to rethink how international power is measured, not just in military terms, but also in terms of diplomatic resilience and strategic coherence in a world where alliances can shift almost overnight.
Right. The idea is that the future of geopolitics might not be about clear-cut good guys and bad guys, but rather a landscape of constantly shifting partnerships and, well, recalibrated power balances. The situation with Israel, Iran, Russia, and China is just one striking example of that.
As we take a step back and look at the picture overall, do you think there's any silver lining in this complex web of alliances for any of the regional players?
Good question. I'd say that while the challenges are immense, moments of cooperation or carefully negotiated ceasefires could still provide temporary stability. However, the underlying tension remains. It's like trying to hold a water balloon filled with stormy weather, one wrong poke, and everything spills out.
Yeah, that's a vivid picture. And it appears that the narrative, even from the video, underscores the dangers of unchecked power shifts and favoritism in international relations. It's a call, in a way, to scrutinize how support is both given and withheld in the global arena.
Exactly. And that scrutiny is so necessary because, without it, we could be setting up the stage for even more dramatic and, frankly, dangerous conflicts down the line. It really paints a cautionary tale of how interconnected and vulnerable modern geopolitics truly are.
Spot on. Well, this conversation has certainly given us a lot to ponder about the real-world implications of these alliances. It's a reminder that in international affairs, sometimes, the line between support and provocation is razor thin.
Exactly. And while the dynamics are ever evolving, staying engaged and critically questioning these shifts can help us better understand what might come next. The landscape is complex, but that complexity is what makes it so fascinating to analyze.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for breaking down these intricacies with such clarity. It definitely makes us think. How prepared is the international system to handle these rapid shifts? And what should be our next steps in understanding or even mitigating potential conflicts?
No problem. It's all about exploring these tangled webs of alliances and the ripple effects they create. And, while we might not have all the answers, acknowledging the problem is the first step toward finding a solution.
Indeed. All right, so as we close out, it sounds like the takeaway is to keep a keen eye on these emerging alliances because they reshape our world faster than we can sometimes grasp.
Exactly. Stay informed, question assumptions, and understand that in the game of geopolitics, nothing is set in stone. Thanks for this sharp discussion, and let's definitely keep this dialogue going as events unfold.
For sure, absolutely.